Terrific. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, William, and Mr. Secretary General. It's a great honor to speak today at this extremely important conference. As William mentioned, my job in this talk is to help us move towards a new paradigm and new tools and techniques to address today's crises and to build true resilience. So let me start with let me start with a simple description of anti-monopoly law, as I believe this subject will allow me to bring all these goals together. In recent decades, we have been taught that competition policy is largely technical in nature. In fact, anti-monopoly is entirely political. It is how we manage power in society. It is how we determine how individuals and groups of individuals compete with one another and to what ends. Anti-monopoly is political economics. Political economics is anti-monopoly. Let's make this absolutely clear in political terms. Anti-monopoly is foundational to rule of law and to all liberty and democracy. In the US context, anti-monopoly was the core achievement of the founding. The Declaration, the Constitution, the Northwest Ordinance, these are the great original documents of anti-monopoly and what empowered Americans to grow and expand our liberty and prosperity for 200 years. Since the Second World War, anti-monopoly has also been a foundation on which Europeans have built their liberties and their prosperities. Let's not forget, one legacy of the American occupation is Germany's embrace of New Deal era anti-monopoly principles to protect democracy and to keep the peace. Since the Second War, anti-monopoly, with its focus on distribution of risk and capacity, has also provided humans with the ability to build complex international systems that, even when tightly coupled, are truly resilient. In other words, anti-monopoly provided us with the intellectual and legal tools we need to promote harmonious communication and cooperation among peoples. The neoliberals of the 1970s had a simple goal: concentrate power and control in the hands of a few. To achieve this, they targeted many institutions, the Union of the Working Person, for instance. Mainly, they aimed at anti-monopoly law. Until the 1980s, anti-monopoly law was based on simple, bright-line rules designed so anybody could understand them. In the case of essential networks, there were strict limits on behavior and structure. In the case of industrial corporations, a 25% limit on market share. In the case of farming and retail, true protection of the family-sized business. The neoliberals knew not to attack such anti-monopoly laws directly. There were simply too many laws. Instead, they proposed a new philosophy to govern how we understand the purpose of all anti-monopoly law. Rather than liberty and democracy for the citizen, the neoliberals said the main goal should be efficiency for the material welfare of the consumer. To buttress this idea, the neoliberals said that only specially trained economists had the ability to properly measure these material benefits of competition. To further buttress this idea, the neoliberals reconceived the very purpose of law itself in economic terms. As the famous jurist Richard Posner put it in 1986, the true meaning of justice, it is efficiency, he said. The audacity of the neoliberal rhetoric would have shocked even Orwell. Concentrated corporate power, that's just the market. Control and manipulation by the monopolist, that's freedom. The true meaning of justice, efficiency. And yet in the early 1980s, Ronald Reagan wrote these neoliberal lies into US antitrust law. In the 1990s, Bill Clinton wrote these neoliberal lies into how we regulate banking, communications, energy, and trade. What the neoliberals achieved was nothing less than an intellectual coup d'etat that overthrew the ideological foundations of the American Republic. And given the centrality of the United States in the post-war system, this coup affected every nation in Europe, every democracy in the world. The same United States that once shared its system of liberty and prosperity with all democratic nations now bullied the world to accept a system of autocratic corporate rule over our economies, over our societies, over our citizens. and the results have been truly counter-revolutionary. Over the last 35 years, we have seen, under the banner of efficiency, the expropriation of millions of independent farmers and entrepreneurs, the capture of control over communications and news media, the sacking of our industrial arts and our healthcare, and the breakdown of international cooperation, the corruption of our science, the destruction of our climate. The term inequality, it's a euphemism that serves only to hide the cudgel and the blood and broken bones of the cudgeled. Today we stand in the rubble of our democracies, extorted and manipulated by the most powerful corporations in history, fires burning our farmlands and forests around us. And still, so many of the economists, staring through the rose-colored lenses of their instruments, using, in the words of Pope Francis, their magical thinking, still so many of these economists say, Amen, it is good. And thus the neoliberals march on behind their barbaric idea of efficiency, sowing our earth and our souls with salt. Today we are supposed to address the economic lessons of COVID-19. From the point of view of someone who studies power, I see three acts of destruction that reinforce one main lesson. First, the monopolists destroyed vital industrial capacity. We did not even have the ability to manufacture 10-cent masks or 20-cent tests. Second, the monopolists destroyed resiliency by concentrating what capacity remains. All those plants to manufacture active pharmaceutical ingredients, all of them in China, just for instance. Third, the monopolists destroyed our ability to use common sense to understand what is actually happening in our society and our world. They did so by using their cash to reconstruct our economic and legal academies around the neoliberal lies. Put more practically, in their successful effort to hide their exercise of power, they also destroyed most ability to understand how corporations and markets work, hence to understand how the system is engineered. Let's be absolutely clear about who are the true defenders of science today. Earlier I spoke of how neoliberalism is science masquerading as justice. It is worse than that. It is anti-science masquerading as science. Thomas Piketty cut to the heart of the matter in Capital. The discipline of economics, he said, has yet to get over its childish passion for purely theoretical and often highly ideological speculation. Most mathematical models, he continued, are no more than an excuse for masking the vacuity of the content. So the ultimate lesson of COVID-19, vacuity matters, or rather, language matters, ideas matter. The neoliberal ideology applied to the real world has thrown us as individuals and as a community into darkness. And in this darkness, we have stumbled close to the precipice. The pandemic triggered a shocking collapse of vital industrial systems, much as did the financial crash of 2008. As someone who first warned of such systemic fragility 18 years ago and showed how concentration was creating this fragility, I hope you trust me now when I say I have seen little sign yet that folks in the academy understand why any of these systems failed, which is one reason why we have yet to begin to fix any part of this problem. We simply got lucky this time. The breakdowns could have been far worse. A few years ago, the OECD undertook as a new core mission to shine a light on how the collapse of natural systems threatens human systems. This is an extremely important task. I am deeply impressed by the work NAEC has done to help us understand this threat. Today, as we move from analysis to policy alternatives, I strongly encourage the OECD and indeed all economic thinkers to add a second related mission, which is to understand how neoliberal ideology was used to empower private actors in ways that led them, perhaps unwittingly at times, to destroy vital human systems of production, of communication, innovation, decision, of thought. Systems we desperately need today in all aspects of our life together, and not least to address the challenges of climate change. Pope Francis gets it. Last week, he wrote that the pandemic had exposed our false securities. For all our hyperconnectivity, he said, we witnessed a fragmentation that made it more difficult to resolve problems that affect us all. His answer, an economy that favors productive diversity and business creativity. That's a quote. In other words, anti-monopoly. We can rebuild the world largely as Pope Francis envisions, largely as all of us want it to rebuild it. Nothing stands in our way. No forces block us. No biological law binds or blinds us. With our own minds and our own hands, we can fashion a political economy that empowers us to master every threat. But we can do so only if we first pull the dead hand of monopoly off our throats. Only if we first liberate our minds from the lies of the neoliberals. COVID-19 may be our last warning. We must not be afraid. We must open our eyes. We must begin today to rebuild our world. I believe it'll prove far easier than we expect. Thank you.